Oh, welcome to another episode of the Growth Compass. Shout out to our sponsor, Senders. If you want to do cold email deliverability correctly, you hit the link in the description. But without them, it would not be possible to interview cool people doing cool things like Lauren. Welcome.
Thank you.
What's happening? So, don't know how many people out there know. I was just telling you before we jumped on this call. I think it's really interesting what you're doing. It's not, I interview a lot of people in the AI space and like this industry, that industry, but this doesn't really fit into a category that I am aware of. So I'm excited to learn more about it. So to begin, if you could just give a quick introduction of yourself and what you're building.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks so much, Blake, for having me on the show. My name is Lauren Silverstein, and I'm currently the founder and CEO of Rising Kitchens. I think before we even get into what Rising Kitchens is, which I'm sure we'll get through in our conversation, maybe one of the things that you picked up on that makes my journey a little bit unique and a little bit different is that it's always struck this balance between like being a leader in the social impact space and also being grounded in academia and making sure that I have like the research and the evidence to back me up in what I'm doing, as a leader in the impact space. I remember, my first job when I was like 23 years old, and I was brought on by the dean of a liberal arts college to help build and lead all their partnership programs between the college and the surrounding community. And so here I was at 23, and I was working with college students, and I was working with the public school students and the teachers and funders and building these college access programs, and I was loving it. And then I was like, oh my God. I was like, do I actually know what I'm doing? It was the first time I realized that real people out there, these parents of these, middle school and elementary school children, these high school teens were trusting me, and funders were trusting me to lead really effective programs and not waste people's time or resources, or worse, disservice their children. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I can't be doing this just off of instinct. I need to go back to school. And that was a pattern that followed where I'd, keep getting these roles that were higher and higher up in different organizations, and realize I got to keep learning. I got to make sure that I'm backing up my leadership with evidence out there so that I actually am, having the impact that I want to have, which led eventually to my PhD with the dissertation titled Are Good Intentions Enough? Really to get at this idea of, yes, good intentions are so important. Yes, many of us have them. And we might need something in addition to our intentions to make sure that we're having the impact we want to have. And so I just wanted to share that as sort of a prelude to where I am now in terms of constantly as a social impact leader, making sure that the work that we're all doing is in fact, really having the positive impact that we want to be having.
So I think this is something we could get into a little later, but quickly, if you wanted to, and if it's possible to answer this quickly, you said good intentions aren't always enough. We might need something else. Is that a consistent thing? That's something else. Is it like X skill or X knowledge or whatever, or
Yeah.
is it case? What is that something
Yeah.
else?
Yeah. No, that's a really, really great question. I think it's somewhat context specific. I will say what is consistent from the research, and what I've come to believe from the research is that good intentions are not enough, and that it does require ongoing evaluation of our efforts to ensure that we really are reaching our goals. And what that looks like will be different depending on the context. Do we have the right kinds of knowledge? Do we have the right ways to connect in relationships to ensure that there's positive outcomes in those relationships? Do we have the right technical abilities, right? There's so many different ways that we can enhance and support our good intentions. What's most consistent in any context is the ability to reflect and evaluate, to check in on ourselves to see how well are we meeting our goals. Not are we meeting them or not. It's never a binary thing. Are we having impact or not? It's how, to what extent are we having the positive impact that we want to have? How well are we achieving our goals? It's always, a range, not just a yes or no response, which is something I always love to work with, with other social leaders and organizations, is understanding where we are in that range from having the ultimate impact we want to have to on the other end, which is disservicing and having a negative impact.
So then is the something else a routine or a habit or the capacity to measure our efforts? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I definitely say the capacity to measure our efforts. And again, that's going to look different depending what the effort is, right? There's different kinds of measures that matter. But I would definitely say that it is that capacity to evaluate and to measure.
Cool. All right. Well, there's two places that I want to go, which is the your experience and your research in the social impact space and Rising Kitchens. But before we get there, if we could just go a little bit deeper into your experience before your journey with entrepreneurship. Is Rising Kitchens the first company that you started, or have you started other companies before?
I started a nonprofit in Hartford, Connecticut that's called Junior Apprentice. I think at the center of my whole career has been this concept of ikigai. I don't know if you're familiar with it, this Japanese reason for being, Japanese term. And so basically what this says is that in terms of our reason for being, each of our ikigais, there's four different concentric circles, if you will. Something we're really good at, something that we enjoy, something we can get paid for, and something the world needs. And the idea is you need all four of those circles in order to find your ikigai. And so what Junior Apprentice was really working in those circles of helping teens find something they're really good at and find something they enjoy, right? A lot of times, when we're growing up and we're trying to get exposed to different careers, we're trying to figure out what we're good at, and so many times there aren't as many opportunities to have that experience, that exposure. So Junior Apprentice, which was the nonprofit I started, connected Hartford teens in hands-on apprenticeship so they could try out different careers. They could get hands-on experience, and most importantly, they could be connected with mentors, people who work in this space, who could help them, show them the ropes and also become a mentor to them, a reference to them, somebody who they can identify with in terms of working in that space. So Junior Apprentice, the first nonprofit I started, really worked on those two circles of helping individuals find something they love and find something that they're good at. Where Rising Kitchens, my current social enterprise, I'm working with adults who have this incredible talent. They know what they're really good at. They know what they really enjoy. What they can't figure out yet is how to get paid for that talent, how to turn that talent into economic opportunity. So now in my career, I'm working on that concentric circle, how to take individuals who have this talent, figure out how to turn that into economic opportunity and mobility.
So how long ago was it that you started the nonprofit in Hartford?
That was in 2013.
So, uh, um, was that what you did until Rising Kitchens?
No. So we had a geographic relocation. And so actually Junior Apprentice got acquired by Junior Achievement. Some of you may know Junior Achievement, which is this incredible career readiness organization. So they absorbed Junior Apprentice. So it's still living and breathing, which is great for me to see.
Yeah,
And I moved
congrats.
Yeah. And I moved to New Jersey and I accepted a role at a large philanthropy organization, which became their chief impact officer, building an impact division. Again, as we're talking about, how do we check in with our efforts? So in philanthropy, you have all these amazing philanthropic, generous donors who are giving large amounts of money to, different causes. And what donors really want to know is my money doing what I really want to be doing? Is it having that positive effect? Is it affecting people's lives? What's the ROI on my charitable dollars? And the philanthropy organizations want to know this too. The disconnect is sometimes they don't have the tools or the expertise to be able to evaluate where their dollars are going. And so this large organization created, to their credit through the strategic plan, created a whole position, which became a whole department to better understand, first of all, the needs in terms of where dollars are most needed. And then second, once we allocated those dollars, how do we understand the ROI of those dollars and then be able to tell our story better, which hopefully, attracts even more dollars. And that was the division that I built for that organization.
Okay, awesome. Because something that's really interesting to me is when people reach a point at any point in their life where they say, "I'm super passionate about this space, this industry, and this is where I want to go." There's a lot of different ways to get involved in a space or an industry or a community of people,
Mm-hmm.
and entrepreneurship is one of the hardest. And
Mm-hmm.
so, we didn't cover too much before that nonprofit, but what about your experiences, professional or personal, up to that point, put
Mm-hmm.
you in a position where you said, "I'm starting a company in order to get
Yeah.
into this space"?
Yeah, that's a great question. Someone once was describing qualities of leaders to me, who in this case, they were talking about working for organizations. And they were saying, in most cases, a leader, there's two types of leaders. There's leaders who really love building, and there's leaders who really love like fixing and solving. And most leaders, you have to have both, right? Because there's always going to be times when you need to do both in an organization. But most like have a proclivity towards one or the other,
Okay.
building or fixing or solving. And I'm a builder, like 100%. That's the category I fall in. I love the building. I love the visioning and turning that into something that is, that's actually actionable and is affecting lives. And so that's, I think, where entrepreneurship comes in, where it's starting with a vision and understanding, what's the problem I'm trying to solve here? And then how do I build something to address that problem in a really effective, meaningful way? I love doing that. I love thinking through that with other people and bringing people on board and getting collective buy-in and then making something happen together. Again, using this, what I've learned, through many years of school as well to make sure we're doing it in really effective and sustainable ways.
When you decided to do why nonprofit versus for-profit model?
So I've done both now. Junior Apprentice was a nonprofit. That one, just the nature of what we're doing, working with teens, really lent itself into the nonprofit, space.
Okay, cool.
Funders, really believe in, investing in the next generation. So that, really, it was very successful from a funders perspective because of
Cool.
what we were doing. Rising Kitchens, the individuals we're working with, these talented chefs and bakers, they have real talent that translates to, being able to receive revenue, right? I mean, there is not a charity. It is when people are, ordering their catering or running events through Rising Kitchens. It's a transaction where they are not only making an impact on this chef's life, right, and helping open doors to this chef and this baker, but they are actually receiving products that are very high quality because these chefs and bakers are so talented. And so there's revenue to be had there. So that fell more into the for-profit space.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So I do want to come back into that. However, I cannot resist asking about your research into social impact, good intentions, things like that, because that's such an
Mm.
interesting conversation to me. So, how did you first, like, why? Like,
Yep.
how did that even come about? Doing a PhD in good
Yep.
intentions, social impact, stuff like that.
I think it all started from that first story that I shared, which is that, I realized I was out there, on the ground as this leader and being like, there's a real possibility here that even though I have really good intentions and I love what I'm doing, without being equipped with the right kinds of information or expertise, I might actually be harming, right? And there's a real responsibility you feel in the social impact space to not harm, right? Because you are there to have a positive effect. It's part of being a social enterprise. It's part of being, mission driven. And so I lived it. And then the more I sort of got involved in the space and even, started working with different programs, you could see where good intentions would go awry. And my dissertation was actually on mentoring programs because when you think of mentoring programs, you think, how on earth could a mentoring program disservice someone, right? But when you really look into it, you start asking these tough questions, which are, well, does everyone deserve to be a mentor? Does everyone qualify as a mentor? How does somebody get to become a mentor? Who decides who's a mentor, right? And that's what the dissertation looked at, which now, of course, can be applied, to the large, philanthropy organization I was, like helping to build the impact division. And does everyone deserve to receive philanthropic dollars? Are there better places for these dollars to go? And so it's just sort of informed, a lot of my work as a social impact leader.
Okay, cool. So there is a very, very this is a very specific interest. Again, it's just I'm so glad that you have this background because there's a video that I saw when I was also in school that
Mm.
very significantly impacted me because it was, very into like social innovation, change,
Yeah.
things like this. There's this video, and I wish I could pull his name or even the name of the video, but basically it's about how the nonprofit sector is broken So I don't know if that rings a bell. If you could help me
I
out.
have, yeah, I haven't seen that video. I
Okay.
think that there's a lot of generalizations made about different sectors,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'd love to hear more about your thoughts or why it
Yeah,
was.
no, no, that's all good. But basically, I just wish I give him credit, but because I watched it like 100 times. But
Yeah,
basically, the thesis of the video is that there's a lot of stigma in the nonprofit space, and I think this can be applied to for profit as well. But there's a lot of
yeah,
stigma in the social impact space
mm,
around the utilization of funds
mm,
where I believe the example in the video is that if if $1 million was used by a nonprofit organization that supports cancer research, and 500 grand of it went to marketing, everyone would be like, "That's criminal." You guys are abusing that money. However, if it went to a video game developer that did like violent video games for teenagers, and 500 of it went to marketing, people would be like, "That's just good capitalism." And one thing that you can walk away with is that this stigma is putting, so when you label an organization as social impact, you immediately put it at a disadvantage to its competitors in the space for talent and for capital, where you can't invest in growth in the
yeah,
same way, and it ultimately limits your growth. And so with your research in the space, with your experience in the space, what is, I mean, I'm open to whatever direction you want to go with that, because
yeah.
it's very broad. But what are your thoughts on that, on growth in as an impact driven organization?
Yeah, I actually am familiar with I don't know if it's that same video, but that argument for sure. And it comes down to this whole idea of what's overhead, right, in the
Yeah.
nonprofit space. And it's that term that's this big, like no overhead, right? Because that means my
Yeah.
dollars aren't going to where they're needed most. And we
Mhm.
don't have that same, expectation, and if it's a corporate entity. We recognize in the corporate sector that you need to be able to market and promote your product if you want to generate sales, right? And why wouldn't that same apply in the nonprofit world, where we have to be able to promote and market our work if we want to bring in more funds to do our work? We want to bring in only the best. I think this is where it applies to our prior conversation, is the nonprofit or social impact space really is worthy of the highest quality, most talented individuals, not just passionate individuals, right? Again, passion may not be enough to
Yeah.
do an
Yeah.
excellent job, right? And most people think, oh, you're passionate, so you go into the mission driven space. Passion isn't enough, and that's the argument. That's actually doing a disservice, and it's undermining, right, this and deprofessionalizing mission driven work. It's grounding it in passion and not necessarily in expertise. And just as any corporate entity who wants to make sure they are effectively selling their product for profit, but they're being effective in selling their product, so too does the social impact space arguably need to be effective, because the stakes are so high. If the social impact space is ineffective, it's actually irresponsible towards not just their funders, but the people that they are trying to service, right? And so I think there's a huge responsibility there to elevate and professionalize the social impact space so that we are holding it to very similar high expectations, recognizing, what needs to happen for our work to be really successful.
So, whichever example you want to use for this question, I think would be awesome. But
Okay.
in your personal experience with, being involved with growth
Yeah.
in, your own ventures and other social impact ventures, have you ran into this specific issue? What has been your experience doing growth in these sectors? Have you experienced something different? People that have different perspectives on it. What was your experience as far as growth in those places?
Yeah. I think with growth that you have to understand what success looks like, your ultimate outcome, the ultimate impact you have in mind. You have to have that defined clearly in order for you to be able to understand your growth and talk about growth. If you don't know what your end in mind is, whatever sector you're in, whatever it's my brand new, startup, right, which is just getting off the ground, or, a long standing philanthropy organization, growth is all relative. You have to know where you're going in order to be able to know if there has in fact been growth, right? Otherwise, you're saying, well, what does that mean? I might tell you that, I was able to, have events this year that had 1,000 participants, or I raised $3 million. Your next question, if somebody says that's great, that's actually an uninformed response. Your question should really be, well, so what? What does that really mean? Were those number of 1,000 participants? What did that lead to? What did those 1,000 participants mean for your organization? Because maybe growth needed to have meant 2,000, right? Whereas if you raise a couple $1 million, so what? What do you actually need to be able to do your work, right? And so we have to be able to talk about the end in mind so that we can evaluate our activity and strategies along the way. And that's one of the biggest thing I work with on organizations is so many times they are coming up with their strategies, they're coming up with their activities, but unless you know your end in mind and the metrics that matter to measure that end, you won't be able to understand the impact of your strategies and activities, such as growth.
Are you able to speak to specific experience that you had either growing your own nonprofit or working for the large philanthropy organization where you set out a strategy for 6 months and they didn't
Sure.
have tracking technology in place and you implemented it? What does that process look like from going to where you can do all the strategy and you don't know
Yeah.
how to track it to then you
Yeah.
tracking it?
Yeah. So I can talk a little bit about Rising Kitchens because it's, it's so fresh.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So, the ultimate impact for Rising Kitchens is really to help take these, early stage local food entrepreneurs and help get their businesses off the ground. They have incredible talent, and yet they're trying to connect to customers, and that's where we come in. As we help really like connect the dots. We have the supply, there is demand. We have to connect these dots, right? In terms of helping boost sales for these new entrepreneurs. So one way to look at it, which many organizations do when they're first starting out, is how many customers are we able to attract for these new entrepreneurs, right? That's one level of measurement. And that's good. You have to know, you have to know how much you're doing. But where it has led to is, okay, not just how much am I doing it, how many customers am I able to get for these new entrepreneurs, but how well am I doing it? Which that next level of measurement is, well, how many customers are coming back? Right? That's the next level we have to get to, which is how many customers are coming back. That's my repeat customer metric, which is showing that not only am I getting new customers, but my chefs are performing at a level that is really satisfying to customers, and they're generating more demand. So now I'm getting repeat customers. That's saying not just how many customers am I getting, but how well am I doing it? And then there's a third level of measurement that we get to, that we have to have in place for a mission-driven organization, which is, and who is better off because of this, right? And so that takes me to a level of measurement, which is in fact, what is the economic, return for the new chefs and bakers that we have brought on through Rising Kitchens? How much revenue are they generating from Rising Kitchens that they weren't generating before? So do you see how those, you can get to 3 levels of measures. Each one is getting at a deeper, more specific level of success. If I left it at the how many customers level, we would never get to, well, are customers happy? Are they coming back? Is there actually economic transformation for the chefs and the bakers that we're trying to help get their businesses off the ground? And so that's how we can get more sophisticated with using our metrics to make sure we're really having the impact that we want to have for the chefs and the bakers.
So after arrive, which I think is awesome. Thank you for walking through that. After, let's say, you went through an exercise, like you just
Yeah.
like you just explained, and you have these 3 metrics. How are you actually doing this? Is this just like an Excel Google sheet thing, or is this something more, like organized?
Yeah. I know. So welcome to the world of a non-tech startup, right? Yes, I definitely use an Excel spreadsheet to track these metrics. Yep.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, from your perspective, if somebody's listening and wanted to do the same thing, would you say that is sufficient, or if they have an ability to make something more elegant or something, like they should look into that, or is that really sufficient?
Yeah. I personally, I find it sufficient. I think it depends how, it always depends on how large, your data set is, if you will, right? So if you're working for huge
Okay. Yeah.
organizations, it might lend itself more to that. I think what's most important, like anything, is doing something in a way that feels really manageable for you. So I even tell, when I'm working with different organizations and different teams, not to have like a million different measures for your success. Pick a few, for the different outcomes and work on tracking those, right? Because if you try to do too much and you don't have the resources or you don't have, the technology, it's not going to happen. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to make this part of process. And whenever you need to, as start a new habit or make something part of process, you have to do it in a way that fits into your routine in a really manageable way.
So then, as far as Rising Kitchens go, how long have you said it's been going on?
So this fall will be coming up on 2 years.
Congrats.
Thanks.
How did you come up with the idea? Did you start it while still at your previous job? Did you quit completely, start this
Yeah.
venture? What did the beginning
I
look
would
like?
say it's the idea had been percolating. I think when I think about if somebody was going to ask me like what my superpower is, I'd really say I'm like a dot connector. So
Okay.
I can just sort of see where there in this case it's a very simple solution to impact. We have supply where I happen to live in New Jersey. We have an unbelievable supply of really, really talented individuals in the culinary space. We have a huge immigrant population, which means people are coming from different cultures, bringing incredible cuisines and their unique talent to prepare these cuisines in really authentic ways. So we have this supply, right, on the culinary side. We also in my local area have a demand. We have a lot of foodies. We have a lot of individuals who really enjoy trying out new food, really authentic food. And we have a lot of companies who do a lot of catering. They want to bring in food for their employees. It gets them in the office. It gets them excited to be there. They want to mix it up from not having, Panera, no offense to Panera, but not having Panera, every single week, right? They love supporting the local communities. They love supporting women and minority and immigrant owned businesses. So we have the demand too. So the problem was that the demand, the companies, different individuals there was no way for them to know about this supply of these entrepreneurs who are getting their businesses off the ground, right? This particular group of entrepreneurs, like any new entrepreneur, doesn't necessarily have the financial resources to have a storefront, to have a large marketing team, they don't necessarily have large social networks so that they know people in the different companies to say, hey, I could do your catering, right? And that's where Rising Kitchens comes in, is connecting those dots, connecting that supply and demand so these customers actually can access this incredible talent and really support getting their businesses off the ground, and their talent can share their incredible cuisine with the community. So it's really not charitable, it's a win-win.
How did you go about after establishing this idea? What was your experience doing the very first customer, a client,
Yeah.
or pilot, or whatever it was?
Yeah, it's all an experiment, right? I mean, there's some days I'm like, this is working, and there's other days where I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah, right.
And so, like any new entrepreneurial venture, and so yeah, I mean, it's taken different customers to really refine our process. It's a lot of listening to both the customers and the chefs to make sure it works on both ends. Given that we're mission driven, my goal is not to really squeeze everything I can from the chefs. We want them to be able to make as much as they can from the customers, and we want on the customer side the process to be totally seamless. And so what Rising Kitchens does is we are this central point of contact where we really streamline everything through us. We do all the administrative details so the chef doesn't have to. They can focus on what they're good at. We collect the sales tax. We're one vendor for companies. So we've been able to iterate after hearing what customers are looking for and what the chefs are looking for too, to really position everyone for success and let them do what they do best.
But so did your first either chefs or on the other side of it, that whatever supply demand, did
Yeah.
your first connections come from your personal network? Did you do any cold outreach? Did you do any
Yeah.
marketing? How did that happen?
Right. Yeah, I've done it all. To try to get people
Nice.
to know about it. So the first ones are definitely from networking.
Okay.
It's from reaching out to individuals that I know at different local companies who I already knew brought in catering, to different individuals who I know like to do a lot of parties at their home. It's using the networks of, those that I know or those who were, part of the idea. I have a bunch of different advisors that I've worked with, as been building Rising Kitchen. So before I actually said okay, start pressing go, I made sure there was enough demand or interest on the customer side so that
Okay.
once I brought the chefs on, I could say, hey, here are some opportunities that we could have coming up. I know this company caters lunch all the time. I know this individual is looking to have a summer barbecue, right? And so I had some customers in the pipeline, if you will, to build the credibility I needed on the chef side. At the same time, I have to build credibility on the customer side, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
a high, we were very selective in the Rising Kitchens and the chefs and the bakers that we brought on because their product, which I don't have anything to do with, making, is reflective of our brand. And so if
Sure.
their product isn't strong or high quality, or if they're late, or there's something that's not super professional, that reflects on Rising Kitchens. And so I almost have two customers here where I have to be very attuned to the quality on both sides of the equation.
Sure. So yeah, it's a marketplace that
Yeah.
like you're building, so it's almost like, you're growing like two companies
Yes.
almost at the same
Yeah,
time. So
exactly.
have if the initial ones went through your personal network, as
Yep.
the company has developed, I mean, you've put
Yep.
a lot of effort into
Yep.
iterating on your product, your
Yep.
values, things like that. But have your growth channels also evolved, or are they still mainly, keeping track of people,
Yep.
networking, things like that?
Yeah, no, they have, luckily. And I would say one of the areas that's become really successful for us, and also on the customer end, has been working with organizations that are like event based organizations. So a lot of the paint and sip places, or the
Yeah.
with the different spaces where people come and make projects, or different event spaces where you have to BYOB, right? So they're already having customers come to them for events, but they need the food component, they need the catering component. And so we can become a vendor for all of these different event spaces where they say, hey, if you are really interested in supporting local, or if you like the idea of bundling a lot of different cuisines, check out Rising Kitchens, right? Because not only are you getting access to great food, but you're opening doors for local food entrepreneurs. And a lot of
Got
people
it.
like that opportunity.
Wow, that's super interesting. So the way that you continue to build relationships with those types of firms is outreach, like.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of outreach.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, so I think it's like 100,000 more questions for you, but there are two that I love
Okay.
to get people's perspective on. And the first one is, at the moment, with everything that's going on, what is the largest hurdle for you, and how is it also an opportunity?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would say the largest hurdle for us is a little bit of what we were just speaking to, which is about finding the right kinds of customers um, who will have many different events, right? And so the cost of acquisition for a customer is pretty high for me, right? And so if we can, whether it's the same cost if there's a customer coming on who just wants a birthday cake versus somebody who wants a company-wide barbecue, right? It's the same cost to get that customer. So the hurdle for me is being able to identify customers where there's a lot of future potential, so that my cost per customer, goes down. And that's where, it's really been a lot of work into the space of not just working with individual companies or individuals who are, like to do catering at their home, but spaces that are constantly, getting new people in who are looking for, in this case, catering. And so that's really the market that we're working hard in to establish ourselves. The other piece I'll say is that constantly reminding our customers of our mission, because the mission is what sets us apart. The mission is about opening doors for new entrepreneurs. And that's what sets us apart from all the other food. I mean, if you want food, there's a million places you can go, right? There's restaurants, there's grocery stores do catering, right? There's a private caterer. So there's a lot of places you can go. What sets Rising Kitchens apart is the mission piece, and individuals who are really looking to not just get access to great food, but really support somebody's entrepreneurial journey along the way. And so that's something I'm constantly needing to remind our audience.
Well, is it the case that you feel like is your perspective on that you'd like to develop, I guess, branding, marketing, sales language, something like that, to so that you don't have to, do the reminding, so
Right.
much, with that.
Yes, I mean, I think building a larger team is definitely, you talk about my dreams, right? When you're starting something from scratch and as a solopreneur, how you build your team so that there's more and more people who are in it with you. I think that's any founder's dream. And so I'm really looking forward to going in that direction.
Cool. Me too. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to do that. My last question for you is that you're doing a lot and it's really awesome. And I'm curious what inspires you.
Hmm. It's a great question. What really inspires me is seeing incredible talent that others have. And this can be talent, in Rising Kitchens right now. It's in the space of, like the culinary space, cooking and baking, but really it's an artist, it's a plumber, it's an author, right? It's a podcaster. It's people who have these incredible talents, and seeing them be able to share this talent with the community, I think we're all better off and we're all elevated from that.
Cool. Well, I'm glad. That sounds right up the alley. That's exactly what you're enabling people to do. So I appreciate that. If there's anybody that is inspired to keep up to date with your journey, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I would say check out, Rising Kitchens, www.risingkitchens.com, or find me on LinkedIn, Lauren Silverstein, and I'll look forward to being in touch.
Boom.
Yeah.
Do it. Check it out. Lauren, thank you so much. This is so
Thank you,
cool.
Blake.
I'm excited to keep in touch and, see how you grow and continue to open doors for people. So thank you. Seriously,
Yes,
this is so
thank you.
cool. You got it.